Hey everybody, KC here. So this week on a number of streaming platforms, there's a new documentary out, and it's called To Die For, D-Y-E. And this is a really interesting documentary done by Whitney Cawood and Brandon Cawood. And they bring an enormous amount of personal experience to this documentary because it's all about the impact that synthetic food dyes may be having on children in terms of behavior. It's about how some of the issues that children who are have things like ADHD, some of those problems may not exactly be psychological as much as they are physiological, created by synthetic food dyes. It's a really interesting documentary. I had a chance this week to have a conversation with both of them in which we talked about their experience and what they're trying to achieve. I'll provide some contact information at the bottom of after the video. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Whitney Cawood and Brandon Cawood. Their documentary is called To Die For. Well, Whitney Cawood, Brandon Cawood, welcome to Morning Newsbeat.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for doing this. So I would really want to get right into it. You sort of make the point in the documentary that the potential harm caused by synthetic food dyes has been sort of, I think you used the phrase a dirty little secret for decades.
Yeah.
But the more I watched the documentary, the more I kind of felt that it wasn't even so much a dirty little secret. It was something that was known that companies and people simply have been unwilling to address. They just sort of ignored the implications. So, well, let's start with your story. Okay, why this documentary and why now?
Yeah, so our son, between the ages of 1 and 3, his behavior was really erratic in the sense that some days were really, really great and we had a very easygoing child. Some days were horrible. We would have several write-ups, constantly hitting, a lot of aggression, sleeplessness, irritability. And so he was so inconsistent. We were having trouble in school and in church and everywhere we went. And so we did an elimination diet. And after the elimination diet, we had an easygoing child for 30 days straight. And then we reintroduced the foods that we took out. And within 15 minutes of reintroducing synthetic dyes, the neurologic behaviors we were seeing before came flooding back. And so we were really surprised because we innately were kind of a clean-ish family. Like his snacks and his foods, the things that he ate daily did not contain synthetic dyes, but he was really getting it through his like daily allergy medication, Benadryl. He had chronic ear infections that year, so he was on 6 or 7 antibiotics for ear infections before we had tubes put in. But we were really surprised that such a small amount of synthetic dyes could dramatically change his behavior and his just ability to cope and his relationships with his friends and of course our home life. And so after that we have been completely dye free and he has done so well. He's succeeding in public school. Academically, he's like doing crazy. He's in the 99th percentile in the entire nation and he doesn't have any behavior problems. He is doing just so well. And so we were really passionate because we were really struggling before, and it's struggling so much in that, well, I thought that I would probably have to homeschool to protect other children from my child and to protect my child from being in situations that, would not be advantageous to him. And so now he's doing so well. So I was really interested about what was going on in the brain. So I started reading the research and it was all really confusing to me. I'm college educated, but even the abstract was really confusing. So we decided to interview scientists and experts, synthetic dye experts. And I asked Brandon if he would document our journey to interview these experts, and he agreed.
And Brandon, you're in the video business. I mean, this is
Right.
what
Yeah.
you do. So it wasn't
Yeah.
like that you were picking up a camera as an amateur.
Right. Yeah. I for my day-to-day job, I'm a commercial photographer and videographer. So I'm doing advertising, video, and photo work. So yeah, video stuff wasn't new to me. Now, full-length, feature-length film was new, and that was a new adventure. But we knew that we had the equipment and the skill set, and God gives you gifts for a reason. We feel like, and so we felt like, yeah, this is something that we not even so much that we wanted to do. We kind of felt like we were supposed to do it. So
As parents, when you first, I mean, I remember in the documentary, you eliminated what? Wheat, dairy, and synthetic food dyes.
That's right. Yeah.
Right? Wheat and dairy were fine. It was
Yeah,
once you
it
put
was.
those back in.
Mhm.
Did you feel I don't know, alone? I mean, I mean, what was your sense of it at that moment? Did you feel like at that moment you had uncovered something that nobody else knew? I mean,
Yeah,
how was, just emotionally, it had to be on the one hand, sort of like a relief. We
for
know what it
sure.
is. And then, oh my God, how big are you, a piece of are you biting off here?
Right.
Yeah, well, I'm a former teacher, so for me to have a child that struggled so much and to try so hard to read all the podcast or to listen to all the podcasts, to read all the books to try to figure out how to help my child, before we figured out the dye sensitivity, I was in a very dark place as a mom and as a woman. Was really struggling with depression and things that I've never dealt with before, and so after we eliminated it, we were obviously incredibly relieved and almost like in disbelief that something we could eat could impact our brain. And so we really thought we were in a camp of, oh, this is very uncommon. And this is very unlikely that any other child would struggle in this way. And I almost felt like our story was hard to believe. And it is like if I were to hear somebody else tell this story, I would have been such a skeptic. I would have said, oh, well, something else must have happened, or maybe they started on an antibiotic, or maybe the therapy suddenly started working. But no, it really was for us the synthetic dyes.
It's interesting you put it that way because one of the things, I mean, it's not like you don't pay attention to the science in the documentary, but that's not what the focus is. I mean,
Yeah.
it's very it's anecdotal in the
Mhm.
sense that you have people like yourself telling their stories, and to me, as somebody who likes to tell stories, that's the best way to tell this story. Because if you have, yeah, you as one mom having that experience, okay,
Right.
maybe it was something else, but then you start to tell more stories and more, and it creates more of a fabric as opposed to just an isolated incident.
Yeah, I like to tell people like this documentary is really about the families, and not just the families that are in the film. We also run a very large Facebook group with that we started around the same time we started the documentary. We just hit 690 something thousand members. So not just these family stories, but the documentary. It's showing these families having some very similar situations, and then also a lot of different ones as well. But then we have the science to show people, look, these people aren't crazy. Like the science is out there. It exists. It's existed for a while. It's just that there's not a whole lot of public awareness around it.
Well, in the OEHA report, it identifies it looks at 27 clinical trials on children. That's unheard of when testing chemicals. That's
Right.
a lot.
Additives.
Additives, yeah. And so the OEHA report, its conclusion is that in some children it can cause or a dye sensitivity can cause hyperactivity, inattentiveness, restlessness, sleeplessness, irritability, and aggression. And that's not anecdotal. We know that from the science. But there are so many more stories. We've heard thousands of stories of even more and more interesting reactions to synthetic dyes. And whenever you look at it and you realize that synthetic dyes are a chemical and that it has kind of a drug-like effect in that everybody reacts to chemicals differently, just like everybody reacts to medications
Right.
differently. And so it does kind of start to make sense. And it's kind of surprising that you can have chemicals like this in our food.
Well, and the thing is, and what really hit home for me is that the entire world is treating these kinds of issues in children as if they're psychological. And in fact, for a percentage, not everybody, but for a percentage, the problems may be physiological and
Yeah,
therefore actually a lot easier to address,
Hmm.
that's right.
right? And it's fascinating to me. I mean, first of all, you're talking about not basically what, 9 synthetic food dyes,
That's
Hmm.
right.
which
And we're
have been
really just talking
approved.
about seven because two of them aren't used anymore.
Okay.
Citrus red, two, or what is that? What is it?
Citrus red 2 and orange B.
Yeah, those two aren't really used anymore. They're still approved, but synthetic dyes have to be batch certified.
Right.
Every single batch, the FDA has to have batch certified. So you can go back and look, and those haven't been batch certified in years, so they're not really used anymore. But
And these are dyes that have been approved for use in the US by the FDA, but are not approved for use like in Europe, right?
Well, it's
Well,
a,
that's a bit of a misconception in that some of them, like Red 3, are handled a little bit different in Europe. But the azo dyes, which are the dyes that are most commonly used here in the U.S., they bear a warning label. So it says in Europe, it
in the
says
EU.
in the EU, yeah, it says may have an adverse effect on activity and attention in children. And
Hmm.
so manufacturers, instead of adding that label, they opt out of the label by adding like natural alternatives like beetroot and turmeric and things like that. So it's much less common in the EU.
Because they're concluding that it's better for the brand to go through the expense of changing the makeup of the product, the
That's
components of
right.
the product, than it is to put that label on the box.
Right.
That's right.
Correct.
Um, and California, as you explain in the documentary, has started to take the first steps in that direction as well.
Correct. So California in 2023 was the first state, and as of right now, I think they're the only state that has completely banned Red 3,
Mhm.
the food dye Red 3. And then just this past year, not that long ago, they banned all the rest of the synthetic dyes in public schools. So public school food.
Yeah. Do you have a sense of, you have 690,000 people in your social media group. Is there a sense of what percentage of children in the US might be affected by these synthetic food dyes?
So all the studies that have been done that we are aware of are looking at if synthetic dyes can have an effect on children. And so they haven't really quantified it. So I can't accurately say that, although we did ask experts, and Dr. Joel Nigg, he's an ADHD expert, and he said that he would estimate that a very conservative number could be up to 8% of children with ADHD that are sensitive to synthetic dyes, and that's just ADHD.
Right.
That's not kids in the general population. Although in Europe, the studies they've done in Europe have shown they just pulled kids from public schools, and so it has shown an effect on children that don't have underlying neurologic conditions. Like our son does not have any neurologic conditions, and so I can't accurately say an exact percentage, but I can anecdotally say there are so many of our friends and family just in our immediate circle that their children react, and it's a spectrum. And so, if you are starting off closer to the hyperactive end of the spectrum, say genetics or other factors have you close to ADHD or needing to be medicated for ADHD, synthetic dyes can send you over into like the problem area. Or if you're on the other spectrum, if you're on the gifted spectrum, synthetic dyes can cause you to go back and not be identified as gifted just because you're not paying attention in school and you're having trouble sleeping and all the things. So it really can. One of the experts compared it to lead. And, after we took out lead, we saw a population shift. Although it was small, it's significant. No one wants to send their entire population back in terms of IQ. Synthetic dyes aren't necessarily having an effect on IQ, but it is having an effect on children. And so, and the effect is actually stronger than lead. So it's pretty intense.
What about adults?
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
So
has there, I'm just curious.
so many questions about
Your
adults.
film,
We
but I'm
get that
just
a lot.
wondering, are there adults who are eating this stuff who also may be affected
Now,
by it?
this is where we have to speak anecdotally because
Okay.
there haven't been very many studies on adults because it's just really looking at most of the studies that we identify in our documentary are just looking at children.
Right.
Aside from Red 3, we know that Red 3 causes cancer, and that would, of course, be with everyone. And then we know that yellow 5, yellow 6, and red 40, many people have an allergic reaction to it, like a true histamine allergic reaction. Yellow 5 and yellow 6 may contain carcinogenic components, and we know that affects everyone. But in terms of neurobehavioral effects, I mean, you would assume that many people that are adults would be affected too. And I can say for me, I did not know I had a sensitivity until I needed an antibiotic that was bright red. And it was even after we started the documentary. But of course, I like move mountains to get my children antibiotics that are dye free. But I didn't want to fight the battle, and I just took it. And I was terrible. The whole week I could not sleep, and I really felt like it affected me, and I was really shocked. So many adults say that they are affected. Our youngest, our daughter, and then also my husband, they don't seem like they're affected at all. But I think everyone is different in the way that their bodies work and the way that they
Yeah.
react.
I mean, it's so interesting. There's so much conversation in this country about violence and anger and emotional isolation, and we see it all the time. On a real different kinds of scale, especially among young men. And I think the tendency, I mean, with some good reason, is to blame it on a lot of it on social media. But I also think, again, this is what your documentary got me thinking. I wonder if we're planting the seeds of this stuff physiologically way earlier than when the kid gets on Facebook or X for the first time.
Right. I mean, it only makes sense that if we're seeing this happen in children, and then like she said, anecdotally, we have
Right.
all adults. We have a lot of adults in our group that don't have kids that are there
Right.
because they feel like dye affects their mood and their anger and their aggression. I think as you get older, that might you're not going up and biting people when you're
Right.
when you're an adult, but
Maybe
No,
more like
not lately.
anxiety and depression.
but I mean, and of course there is
Right.
Suicidal
there is
thoughts.
mental illness. Like we're not saying that dyes obviously are the cause of all this type of behavior, but if you look at it and you're like, okay, we know the science shows that it does cause this behavior, and then we have children in schools where behavior is an issue. We have special education budgets that are getting increasingly larger. We have prisons that serve synthetic dye food. So it's like it seems only common sense that there's going to be some people that are affected by these synthetic dyes, and that stuff can be improved by removing it.
It's so funny you say that. My daughter's a special education teacher. And I was telling her about your documentary, and she just looked at me and said, Dad, I can only imagine how much of this stuff is in the lunches that are being served to these kids. And again, you're not going to solve every problem with this.
Right.
But if you can start to address some of the issues with some of the kids, it would move the needle enormously. And here's the other thing I couldn't believe, and this came out of your documentary. There's actually ADHD medication that includes synthetic food dyes, which
Yeah.
is
That's right.
that's nuts.
It is crazy. If the WEHA, so when we're saying the WEHA report, that's the California Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment. So they put out a report back in 2021 that was like a meta-analysis of all the studies and the data. But their report, where was I going with this?
I don't know.
It's okay.
What did you just say?
No, I say it's nuts that the ADHD medication.
Oh yeah, ADHD medication. Right. So in their report they say that the number one way to help alleviate ADHD aside from medication is removing synthetic dyes. So
wow,
which is big.
So what do you want? I mean, in sense, do you want? I mean, will warning labels do it, or do you want these things banned? I mean,
We want education. We want parents to know that this could be an issue. We want schools to be aware of it. And of course, I don't think the synthetic dyes have any place in public schools or in public prisons. Anything where you don't have a label and you can't make an informed decision, I don't believe it should be there.
Right.
I think a warning label would be good and advantageous, but I also think that manufacturers, I would love for them to start creating products that are dye-free. It can be done. Several years ago, there were manufacturers, they wanted to do it, and I think they had good intentions, and they decided not to because it was challenging. But there are so many companies that have done it now, so we know it can be done. We look at Trader Joe's, all their candy's brightly colored, and it's incredible how vivid their blue is that they get from spirulina. So it can happen. And then we have Panera Bread, which all their colorful treats are dye-free, and they're vivid and beautiful. Dunkin' Donuts has pulled synthetic dyes out of most of their products, and once again, they're bright, vibrant, and beautiful. Baskin Robbins, the same. They've quietly pulled synthetic dyes out of their products, and they still have these bright, vibrant, beautiful colors. It may be at a slight cost to manufacturers because spirulina is more expensive than synthetic dyes, which are oftentimes a byproduct of petroleum. But really, that's what consumers want. And I want to point out that in our group we have almost 700,000 people. I create lists at holidays and at Christmas to give our audience, some options that are dye free so that their children can enjoy colorful, fun things that they might not enjoy. That they might be worried that they wouldn't enjoy otherwise, and they go crazy. Every single time I post a list, the virality is insane. Thousands and thousands and thousands of shares because this is what consumers want. So I do want manufacturers and grocery store chains to consider looking at this, because I think that there is a niche here that has been kind of that I think has just exploded overnight, if I'm being honest. And I would also love a warning label. I think that it would be good to inform consumers that this could be something that could cause harm to their children, so that they can make informed decisions. And ultimately, that's what I want. I want people to be able to have the facts so they can make informed decisions.
Well, and for my audience, let's point out that that almost 700,000 people who are a member of your group are somebody's customers.
That's right.
And it seems to me
and I can tell you who it is, because in my analytics, I know exactly where they're going.
So I mean, it seems to me, and some companies are gonna be able to do it more easily than others, but if you've got any kind of an online presence, it ought to be fairly simple to create an algorithm that if I say on that website, I want only dye-free products, they ought to be able to give me that kind of list. And I should point out here, and I want to be transparent about it, is we were introduced by the folks at Sifter. And they're a morning newsbeat sponsor. And one of the things Sifter does is they allow consumers to sift through the products that are available in their stores so they can eliminate food dyes if that's what they want to do. And it seems to me this is the kind of thing, if you have 700,000 people in your group, there could be 7 million people out there.
Exactly.
Oh, for sure. And it's growing by thousands a day.
Or we're just scratching the surface. And that's all organic. We haven't put any money into our group.
We even had a month where we were getting about 10,000 new requests a day. It was insane. So, we haven't posted, or we haven't done any ads or anything. It's just been completely organic. So to your point, there are thousands and thousands, if not millions more customers waiting just to buy dye-free products. And I can say, if anybody wants to make millions, there's not a single product that is a dye-free candy corn on the market. Not a single one. I get hundreds, if not thousands of questions every single Halloween about a dye-free candy corn. If I had the money and if I had the ability, I'd make it, but I don't. So I'm giving that to your audience because we need a dye-free candy corn.
Well, I will make sure that I provide all this kind of contact information in the text version of underneath this. Let me ask you just a couple of quick questions, because your film is launching this week. You have lots to do.
Today. It's live today.
Hey, first of all, I don't want to make this political, but it would seem to me that whatever one thinks of RFK Jr., if he does become run the Department of Health and Human Services, he would be sympathetic to what you're talking about.
I think so.
He would. Right? I also want to point out that historically legislation has really only come from Democrats. So this is truly a bipartisan issue. Both parties have recognized that this is an issue, and I really feel like this is something everyone can get behind.
Well, and I would say probably your listeners are probably paying attention, and I honestly think the stage is set right now for a company or a manufacturer to come out and be the first person to, back in the middle of the 2010s, we had a few companies who made these commitments, and people were really excited about it. And of course, they didn't end up following through with it. But the stage is set now.
The stage was not set before.
Somebody is going to be the first one to step up and say, we are eliminating dyes from our portfolio, and we are going to move in this direction. Yeah. And they're going to get a lot of praise for that. So.
And there's a lot of virality in that, like in our group, it's being shared that Panera is completely dye-free. Dunkin' Donuts, most of their donuts are dye-free. Baskin Robbins and even Starbucks, right. Like people are talking about it, and that's like completely free marketing in that it's so viral. People want it, and I mean that can only be advantageous to companies. So
let me ask you another question here. And it's going to come up, and I want to address it because people will watch the video and then they're going to ask me a question about it, which is the Center for Science and the Public Interest. They played a pretty. There a number of their folks are in your documentary. Some people, because I've heard it before when I've quoted their studies, will say, oh, they're anti-business, they've got a political agenda.
Yeah, we've heard that.
Yeah, address that for a second.
So I can say, like Center for Science and the Public Interest, they are citing other people's studies.
Right.
They are working with scientists and toxicologists, and it does seem like historically there has been kind of a rift there between industry and CSPI. But I can say that I do believe that they have the consumer at heart. But I want to change the narrative. I think there's been this big us or them situation for a long time, and that's not the kind of people that we are. And I have people that I love and in my circle that have worked in the candy industry for a very, very long time, and they're wonderful humans. I've never met more kind people, more generous people, and they were very open to talking about this, and they've never heard about synthetic dyes. So we don't believe this big bad narrative that every single person in industry is bad and trying to poison us. I think that this like polarizing political season we're in, and this polarizing us and them thing in all areas, is not productive. And we really want to change the narrative to work cooperatively. We now know, and to your point, there are many people, although these studies, some of them are old, but we haven't known about it. And now people are starting to know about it. People in industry are starting to know about it. We know now, let's move forward and make some different decisions and work cooperatively together.
Well, another thing I want to point out, like people are going to watch our film, and I feel like our production value is pretty good. The film is very well, but like we did this film with two people, a husband and a wife. And so like,
yeah, like we composed the music. Well, not me. Brandon composed the music, did all the graphics.
We feel fortunate that the people who got put in our path were put in our path. Like we have two people from, well, one, Lisa used to work at Center for Science and Public Interest, and she's now retired. And she's does some consulting with them now. And then Thomas, and that's really, to be honest, that's about the extent of the contact that we had with CSPI as like a whole, was the two of them. But we're super happy with like people they've connected us with, and the way they've gotten behind what we're doing. And so keep in mind that we're two people.
And I think that we could also connect people cooperatively. Like I genuinely think we could connect people in industry with CSPI and have a good, wholesome conversation and work together and work cooperatively. Like I don't think that there's a world where that doesn't exist.
So just to dispel any conspiracy theories, can I ask you where you got your funding from?
So, well, okay, so I'll be very explicit here. So we spent about 20 to 25,000 from our savings to do this. Mm-hmm. And then we had two crowdfunding campaigns. The first crowdfunding campaign was mostly friends and family. So we had people give 100, we had one person give 1,000, and then lots of 20s and 10s, and that covered our travel costs. And then the second crowdfunding campaign, we had a larger audience at that point, and so they helped cover post-production costs like lawyers' fees and E&O insurance and things like that. And then we had one local grant, about a $16,000 local grant. So we own 100% of our film. This was a passion project. It's an investigation from us, and we had zero outside influence. And so we feel like it's a really good representation of our journey.
Okay, so the movie's out this week. Where can people see it?
So there's multiple places you can see it on: Prime Video, Apple TV, Google Play, Fandango at home, or Vimeo on demand. But if you want to, like, the easiest way to get to everything is go to dieforthedocumentary.com/watch, and that has a link to every single one of the platforms that it's available on.
I will do that. And where can people then find out more about your movement and get involved?
Yeah, so you can go to dieforthedocumentary.com/resources, and we have tons of resources. We have lists and guides and a blog that helps you eliminate synthetic dyes, and we can walk you step by step through how to do that, how to read it on a label. But I think that would be the most advantageous way.
And I assume your contact information is on the site.
Yes.
It is, correct. Yeah.
Well, listen, I think you're doing noble work here, and as both somebody who's been involved in the food industry and writing about it for a long time, but also as a parent, I really appreciate the hard work you're doing, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
All right, bye.